everyone, and welcome to another episode of Little Give. I'm so excited for you to meet our guest today. Go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from. Tell us what you're all about.
Hey, Cindy, thank you so much for having me. My name is Nick Gaylord. I have a podcast, which we're going to talk about a little bit. It is called Our Dead Dads Podcast. Sounds a little weird. It has its moments. It's a podcast about grief, trauma, loss, processing everything, and moving forward. I'm originally from New York. I currently live in Tampa with my wife, Kim, and my 18-and-a-half-year-old calico cat, Maxie, who is sitting right next to me, as she usually is during the work week. I started this podcast I started the work for it close to a year ago, about February, March of 2024, launched it in June of 2024. I've already released 31 episodes, and I've got a lot to tell you about it.
Oh my goodness, this sounds so interesting. I mean, the name is a little off-putting, but I know that's all for a reason. So I'm excited for you to dive in with the audience and explain how this podcast came to be and why you're so passionate about it.
Sure, thank you. So it really came to be because I 1 year ago found myself unemployed. I have worked in the pharmaceutical, clinical trial, medical device, biotech field for almost 30 years. Actually, this year will be 30 years. And I was working on a 2-year contract, which ended on December 31st, 2023. I did not have anything lined up, and I found myself unemployed for what turned out to be about 3 months. So about mid-January, when I was finished with all of the projects that my wife asked me to get done around the house because I had so much free time, I needed something to start to occupy myself before I started climbing the walls or get her to kick me out. And a friend of mine was actually getting ready to start her own podcast, nothing to do with this, just totally different, but a podcast. And she said, maybe you should think about it. And like, what do I know about podcasting? I know nothing. I've never done anything in media, television, radio, anything. But of course, you can learn these things. So there was a lady named Christina Driscoll, which her name will come up again later. She is a podcaster. She has a show called She's Brave, the She's Brave podcast. And I had been following her show and then saw a post that she put out on Facebook about starting a class to teach others how to become a podcaster. Reached out to her, had a conversation, told her my story about what I thought I would want to talk about, which was grief based on losing my dad, which I'll get back to in a moment. And she said, you absolutely need to do this. So I went into the class, and 12 weeks later, I had a podcast. It wasn't just that. The premise for the podcast is I have 3 younger brothers and 3 very close friends that I've known since junior high school. And we've always been very tight. All of us have lost our dads. My dad passed away in May of 2021. And the phrase "our dead dads" actually started as a joke between myself and my youngest brother, Michael. He was asking me one day to look for a movie that my dad had years ago, looking on eBay or wherever. And he said, come on, do it for our dead dad. And I just stopped and laughed. I was like, really? And kind of thought about it. And it was funny. It was kind of gold. So it just kind of became a catchphrase between all of us. And when the time came to start the podcast, I knew I wanted to talk about grief because my dad and I had a very complicated relationship. He was a very complicated individual. He was married and divorced 5 times. I'm the oldest of his 7 kids that I know of. It was not the best relationship, not the worst, but it could have been better. When he died, I didn't realize that there was still grief inside. I thought I was good, and I thought I'd made peace with it. A few months later, it turned out I really had not. I was starting to kind of get a little irritable and snap at people. And my wife suggested, so this is now the fall of 2021, she suggested that I talk to somebody, a professional. And she was right. And I found a therapist online. We were actually living in Texas at the time, and this was still during the height of COVID, so everything was virtual. But I found an amazing lady, and we worked together for about 6 months. And by the end of those 6 months, everything had changed. I went from not wanting to talk about this and just really not wanting to do a deep dive to, on the other side of that, I had forgiven my dad. I was able to forgive my dad for being the person that he was. I was able to forgive him for not being the person that we all know he could and should have been. I was able to release all of the anger that I had toward him, and it was a lot. Again, you don't live a life where you're married and divorced 5 times and have little to no relationship with most of your 7 children and not have people who are angry at you. He just everything that ever happened in the world, in his opinion, was somebody else's fault. Everybody wronged him, even though nobody did. But that's just the way he saw it. And if he had lived 25 more years, nothing would have ever changed. But again, I held on to a lot of that stuff through the process of therapy. I was able to release all of that, and it's just incredible. And it was, really, it was an amazing feeling to just get that off my chest and to just have that weight off my shoulders. So when the time came to start a podcast, I knew it had to be about grief, because I know what I went through dealing with my situation. And I realized there are so many people out there who have similar, maybe not as bad, maybe way more worse situations that in a lot of cases, they haven't even begun to process. So this podcast is a platform for anybody who has a story. And it's not just dead dad stories. It can be anybody. This is grief, loss, trauma of all kinds. And anybody who has a story to tell, anybody who has a story that they've never really gotten into, this is the platform. Come in and let's talk about it. Because I believe the most important thing with grieving is you need to start somewhere. If you don't start, you try to ignore it until it goes away, it ain't going to go away. It's going to come back and bite. I tried pushing it down. Nope. It will come back, and usually it will come back worse. So that's why I started this.
Hi, my name is Justin Clark, and I'm the president of the board of directors for Driving Single Parents, a 501c3 nonprofit serving the citizens of San Antonio and Bexar County, Texas. I'm here today to tell you a little bit about the great work that our organization is doing for the citizens of San Antonio. What you're about to see is just a few photos and videos of the way that we're changing lives for single parents in and around San Antonio, Texas. Our first giveaway took place in April of 2017, just one short month after the formation of our organization. John, a Bexar County resident, was the victim of a horrible drunk driver incident. He and his daughter survived the crash, and we were so proud to give our first car to this deserving family. Fast forward to 2020, a very difficult year for nonprofits. We were able to secure 4 vehicles for single parents in need. Our organization, including our board of directors, list of partners, and portfolio of people we've been able to help in San Antonio, continues to grow, and it's all thanks to donors and local community organizations that have helped us along the way. This giveaway took place in 2021 and shows that we continue to help single parents even after the struggles brought about by COVID-19. Because of limited funds and the overwhelming need, we at Driving Single Parents are incredibly selective with the people we help. Some are victims of domestic violence. Others had a spouse pass away tragically or otherwise fell on hard times. These single parents show adversity in the face of challenge and aren't looking for a handout. We offer a hand up and help get them back in the driver's seat. Many of the single parents we help go on to graduate college, get promotions, get married, mentor others, and some have even been so touched by the gift we gave them that they have decided to join our board of directors to pay it forward and ensure the continued growth of our organization. If you would like to help our organization continue to grow and continue to help single parents in need in San Antonio, Texas, and Bexar County, Texas, we would really appreciate your support. Please visit us online at www.drivingsingleparents.org. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, it's great that you took your own personal experiences and turned it into something to help other people, which is what this show is all about. Really about those little gives that really can show up in places that you never expect. And like for you to have gone through all the therapy you went through to really understand your grief process and unpeel those layers and resolve some of those issues. It's amazing. Do you use a lot of the tools you learned during that time in the podcast as you're speaking to these individuals who are going through or have been through grief?
I certainly try to. I want to start by saying I am not a professional. I'm not a therapist. I didn't go to school for this. And I've made that very clear on the podcast. I'm not trying to cure anybody. I'm not trying to fix anybody. I'm trying to give people the opportunity to process their grief. I guess the tools that I try to use is have compassion and understand that everybody has a story, and bring no judgment to the table, regardless of what the story is. And not that that's ever been an issue, but still, I don't bring any judgment. And I ask my listeners not to bring any judgment, because everybody has been through crap. And there's no reason to say, oh, well, this and that. No, just listen to what the person has to say. It's not about me once the camera goes on. It is about my guests. And so here's something to throw out there. Somebody recently asked me, a few people have asked me, somebody asked me this a couple of days ago. How do I deal with, or how do I process all the things that I'm hearing? 31 interviews so far, and it's a lot. It is intense. And I've got some really, really intense interviews coming up even in the next couple of months. And my answer to that is I work with the person the best I can. I don't make it about me. This isn't my story. If you're coming onto my show, this is your story. I'm going to be there the best I can for you. Also, every interview that I do, I have a pre-interview, like an introduction conversation. So I know generally what we're going to be talking about. So I'm really not caught off guard. That doesn't always make it easier to hear it. But yeah, I just try to learn a little bit more each interview, and learn a little bit more from each guest, and carry that the best way I can into each following interview.
Do you find that some of the conversations that you've had with these individuals have kind of helped you heal a little bit more in different ways? I know you said you worked through a lot of the stuff you've been through, but you never know what that sneaky thing is that might come up during an interview. And maybe you're like, hey, have you had that happen before?
Absolutely. I don't know if I can give any specific examples, but yes, regularly I have said several times that I feel that doing this podcast is kind of an extension of my therapy. I didn't know that I needed it in the beginning, 3 years ago or 3.5 years ago, I guess now, when I started the therapy process. And talking to everybody has been, I don't really know what the word is. It's been rejuvenating. It's been cleansing. It's so helpful to continue the process of grieving my dad, regardless of the relationship that we had. Again, as I said before, it wasn't all great, but there were good parts. And hearing my guests talk about the good things, the bad things, yeah, some of it comes all screaming back and thinking, oh, geez, here we go again. I can totally relate to this. But at the same time, there's always the good stuff, and I can relate to that too. Yeah, I think that's the best answer I can give.
That's a great answer. It's a great answer. So when you first started the podcast, was it supposed to all be about our dead dads, right? And then later on it evolved into being about a lot of things, or has it always been meant to be for many things?
Having had no experience in this field, having never done a podcast, I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know where this was going to go. I didn't know if it was going to be all about dead dads or if it was going to go into other stories. And very quickly, it moved, without even trying, it moved into other areas too, just parents, siblings, children. Like I said, there have been some incredibly intense conversations. At this point, nothing is off limits, especially with some of the things I've got coming up soon. And given what I've talked about in the past with other guests, absolutely nothing is off limits. I have said before that if somebody has a story and if they are willing to talk, I'm willing to listen, because grief comes in all shapes and sizes, all forms. There's no two grief stories that are alike. For all of the hundreds or thousands or millions, whatever, of books and webinars and seminars and pamphlets that talk about grief and say, this is the way to go, the 5 steps of grief, or the 12 steps, however many steps, I don't even remember at this point, but however many steps of grief there are, it's not all the same for everybody. Grief is not linear. I hope it's okay to say this. One of my guests, famously now to me, said, grief is not a pissing contest. And she's right. It's not about making it your grief is more intense than mine or mine's more intense. It's not about that. Just tell your story and let's just talk about it. Let's have a conversation. Let's, laugh, cry, have some fun, whatever it is. But there's no comparisons at all. There never has been, there never will be. And that's what I want my guests to know. Don't try to compare your story. I mean, I've had guests have contacted me and said, well, I don't know if my story is really what you're looking for. Do you have a story? Yes. Then that's what I'm looking for. That's all. And that's why we have introduction conversations, because just in case it's really not what I'm looking for, that really hasn't happened, then I know. And then we can, not waste each other's time or take up each other's times. I don't want to say waste. But yeah.
Hi, my name is Andrew Fraley, and I believe that sometimes we all need a little bit of help. If you're in the San Antonio community and you need some legal help, call me at 210-725-4658.
Yeah. Well, earlier you had mentioned that, when you first, somebody whispered, to you, like kind of mentioned, maybe you should start a podcast. And you said, well, I don't know anything about that. What gave you that confidence to even try, to even put yourself out there like this? Because there's a lot of people who are terrified to do something like this. Why don't you tell the audience how you pushed through that?
Okay. So funny story. I mean, it's kind of a long multi-part, so I'll try to sum it up. Again, Christina Driscoll, who I mentioned earlier, she and I had the first phone call when I told her my idea for a podcast. And again, she said, 100%, I love your energy. You've got the voice for this, which, by the way, everybody that I've talked to said, you've got the radio voice. You've got the voice for podcasting. One of the biggest things with me is I hate the sound of my voice being recorded, listening back to it. I've always hated it. It's just been something that it's like nails on a chalkboard since I was a kid. I've never enjoyed the sound of my own voice. The first assignment that Christina gave us in the podcast class was take our cell phones and the little voice recorder app and record a 1-minute segment talking about what the podcast is going to be about. So, all right, anybody can talk for 1 minute, right? Well, it took me a half an hour to record that damn 1-minute clip because I kept stepping over my words and just kept stammering, and I couldn't get it out. And I was immediately thinking, what the hell did I do? I've made a huge mistake. I can't do this. And everybody else said they had the same trouble. And I talked to Christina after the class, and she's like, don't worry about this. You got this. Like, the worst part is over. You did the assignment, and now, like, you ripped off the Band-Aid. And she said, think of that as ripping off the Band-Aid. And it's all downhill from here. I mean, it's all uphill in the sense of it's just going to be an incredible ride, but the worst part is over. Like, after the first step, kind of like grief, you just start the conversation, and after that, it will start to get a little bit easier and a little bit easier. That was really what started for me. And when she told me that, and she said the worst is behind you, and especially the entire class, and she has listened to my podcast. I have actually interviewed her, and that episode will be airing. I'm not exactly sure when. I think it's going to drop sometime in March. That was just an unbelievable interview, and she has shared the interviews on Facebook. She has shared my posts. She has talked about me on her show. She has put a post about me. So that is a huge confidence booster, something that I just never imagined when I started this.
Yeah, you just never know. People don't know how much those little things mean. Those little things that she did, like posting about you and helping you and giving that little confidence, means so much to you. And sometimes people don't even realize what a big impact that's making. Which leads me to my little gift questions. I ask each of my guests 2 questions. And the first one is, can you give the audience an example of a little thing that they can do in their community that might just be a little give on their end, but might make a big impact on the other side?
So this might sound kind of lame or kind of vague. I really hope it's not. Make better decisions. Be nicer to everybody. There's something that a gentleman named Doug, who was a previous guest of mine, my first guest from Australia, when he was on the show, during his interview, he was talking about what he went through with his dad and how his dad was not a pleasant person, but his mom had passed when Doug's mom had passed when he was, I think, 11 and a half years old. And so unfortunately, his dad just was not great to be around after that. Doug had said, I think the question he asked me was, what if every man on this planet made one better decision every day? And my answer was, it would be a very different world that we were living in. And it would be. And it doesn't have to be big decisions, just little decisions. Just say a nice thing to somebody. Just go up and say, hey, how are you? How's your day going? Just find a way to just be nice. Hold a door. Whatever it is, just make a good decision. Make a lot of good decisions, but just start with one per day. Be nice to people. Be nice to everybody. Don't just pick and choose who you're going to be nice to, even if you come across somebody who you really can't stand. Find it in you to be nice, because everybody has it in them. If we could do that, the monumental changes that would happen within our communities, within our towns, within our families, within our friend circles, at our jobs, on social media, it would be a much different world. I mean, all right, fine. Social media is a little bit different because everybody has an attitude on social media. But generally, I think that's my answer. Just be a good human, be a better person.
It's a great example, and I couldn't agree more. If everybody just did one little thing every single day, it could really move the needle to making this world a much kinder place. So I love that example. Yes. Can you give the audience an example of a time in your life where somebody did something little for you that might have just been a little give on their end, but really made an impact on you and in your life?
So I know we've already talked about it, but the answer that I had thought about for this was Christina. Really just nudging me and getting behind me to do this podcast. You know, when she and I started talking, I want to say it was either late January or early February of 2024. Again, I was unemployed. I had no money coming in, and I was really worried about spending the money that it was going to take to start this up. The equipment cost, the subscription for Buzzsprout and for Descript and for Zoom and StreamYard or anything. Well, now I'm moving over to StreamYard, but all of the things cost money. And all the equipment that I was going to have to buy, it cost money. And I was really freaking out about it. And she said, look, I completely understand the hesitancy. She's like, look, you don't have to go nuts with equipment. You can start small. You can buy more later. But just generally, she's like, even as far as doing this class, excuse me, she said, I can promise you one thing. If you don't do this, and this is after her telling me, you've got the voice, you've got the personality, you've got the story, you will succeed at this. She said, if you don't do this now, if you wait until you have another job, until money's not an issue anymore, she said, you will find 100 reasons why you are too busy and you will not do it, and you will probably never do it. She said, start now. And worst case, once you find a job, if it is too crazy, if it's too overwhelming, then you can put the podcast on the back burner. There's nobody saying that you have to do this forever and you have to do this, that, and the third. And she said, you can put it on the back burner if it becomes too much. But she said, if you start now, I promise you, you will fall in love with this. You will see how good you are at this, and you probably will not want to stop. If she hadn't done that, and if she hadn't convinced me to just to take the class, this was even before I had bought any equipment. If she hadn't had that conversation and taken that time with me to say, this is something, you've got something special here, you need to do this, I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't have a podcast. I wouldn't be helping people. I hope I'm helping people. But I wouldn't have the podcast. And yeah, I'd have a job. And I mean, I started a new full-time job last March, so I would still be doing that, but who knows what else I'd be doing. It certainly wouldn't be this. And one of the other bigger underlying reasons for why I started the podcast was because I've always had an overwhelming desire to help people. I never knew as a kid what that was going to be. I just know that I wanted to help people. And I thought that I had kind of found that in the pharma and clinical trial industry, because we do a lot of incredible work for a lot of people who really need certain things, certain drugs to help them to improve their lifestyles. But something that I realized when I had time, when I was unemployed and I started thinking about it, is it's not enough. I need more. When we were in Texas, after we moved from New York to Texas, my wife got laid off from her job for 12 years. And she started a catering business because she's a chef. She's a project manager. She started a catering business in Texas, and it exploded. Even during COVID was the best thing that happened to it, because nobody could go to restaurants. Everybody wanted her food. When we moved to Tampa in May of 2022, she had to basically shut it down because the biggest thing driving that was our circle of people, which we didn't have when we got here. And so after we moved in, settled in, and quickly bought a house, then she started a travel agent business, and that has exploded. Anybody, I won't go into details now, but anybody who listens to my show, her travel business, Kim Gaylord Travel, is one of the commercials, so you can find all the details out. And Kim kind of told me, like, look, you gave me the ability to do the catering business when it wasn't bringing in much money. You gave me the freedom and the grace to start the travel agent business. And anything that woman touches turns to gold, I'm telling you. And I'm so blessed and grateful for that. But she said, look, you've always been the one who has supported us and, made sure that, you had the insurance and all that other stuff with your job. Take the time, take the money, do this. And so between Christina and my wife, if it wasn't for both of them, I wouldn't have started this. And who knows, I'm sure I'd have a perfectly good life right now, but I wouldn't have found this.
Right. Yeah. It's just amazing how when somebody else has more confidence in you than you have in yourself, and you can borrow their confidence to try to think outside of what you would normally do and do that. And look where it's got you now. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that little gift with us. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
What about nonprofits? Do you have any nonprofits that you're excited about?
I do. The nonprofit that I would like to talk about is the Gabby Petito Foundation. Now, that name may ring a bell for a lot of you. It may not for others. Gabby Petito is originally from New York. She had moved to Florida in the summer of 2021. She and her fiance, Brian Laundrie, they bought a little van and they set out on cross-country trip. They traveled from coast to coast. They started from his parents' home in Florida. They went all throughout the West, all over the country. Basically, 3 months later, I think it was about 3 months later, he returned home without her. And so her parents obviously knew something was going on, got the police involved, and huge search, nationwide search went underway. It was all over the news. And unfortunately, when she was found, she was no longer with us. Some number of days later, Brian Laundrie had turned up that he had taken his own life. And it's in the news. I don't have to get into that, but basically, Gabby has, and I say has because her family says has, and I say has 4 parents. Her mom and dad had never been married, but I think they'd split up when she was still a baby. Her mom got married, her dad got married. So basically, Gabby had 4 parents. All 4 of them started the Gabby Petito Foundation shortly after her passing. The mission of the foundation is to address the needs of organizations that support locating missing persons and to provide aid to organizations that assist survivors of domestic violence through education, awareness, and prevention strategies. It's something that it's near and dear to my heart. I followed this case when it happened, and actually, I in the last couple of months have been able to meet Gabby's mom and bonus dad, Nikki and Jim, and they are just unbelievably good people. I have not yet met her dad, Joe, and her bonus mom, Tara. Hopefully that will happen soon. But I'm actually doing an interview here at my house, believe it or not, with her mom and her bonus dad. They live less than an hour away, and they had asked about doing an interview in person. So I told them any opportunity I have to promote the foundation, I'm going to do. I don't exactly know when that interview is going to drop. There's something else that kind of goes along with that I can't talk about right now. It's a good thing, I promise, but I can't. I'm not allowed to talk about it. You'll understand why when it comes out. Nikki and Jim are just such wonderful people. I've gotten to get to know them. Actually, Kim is working with them for travel to plan some trips. I told them that I would support their foundation however I could, whether monetarily, telling other people to go there. So that's my answer. The Gabby Petito Foundation is absolutely the way to go.
I love it. I have not heard about this nonprofit. I have heard the story, but I did not hear about this nonprofit until you've mentioned it today. So thank you for sharing it with us. What a beautiful nonprofit that's out there making big changes in a really, really meaningful way. So thank you for sharing that. For everybody out there who's
Absolutely.
watching today, why don't you tell them where they can reach you, they can find out more about you, and they can find that podcast?
Sure. So the podcast is called Our Dead Dads. It is available on all platforms: Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon Music, Pandora. I can't remember all of them. I want to say it's like a dozen or so. Excuse me. It's out there everywhere. Just go to Google and find Our Dead Dads podcast. You'll be able to find it there on your favorite listening platform. I have a website. It's called ourdeaddads.com. Again, as we talked about before, I'm looking for stories of all kinds of grief, trauma, loss. If you think that you have a story and you would like to talk to me and potentially be a guest on the show, please go to ourdeaddads.com. All the way on the right side of the page, there is a link that says contact us. The first thing on the drop down is be a guest. Just click there, fill out that form. Please do not be shy about your answers. There are some people in the past that for certain questions have said, like one of the questions, there you go, says list 3 to 5 questions that you may want me to ask during the interview. Some people just say, oh, I'll leave it up to you. Don't leave it up to me. There's a reason why I'm asking you not to leave it up to me, because that is what's going to drive the interview. Again, we have these introduction conversations so that I know what we're talking about, so that I can make sure that we're a great fit. We're going to have the intro so I can kind of go through some of the details, but I want to know what you want to talk about. This is your story, so spill it for me. If you're willing to go on a podcast, then you've got to be willing to talk to me ahead of time. But please, anybody who wants to have a conversation, please fill out the Be a Guest form, and I'll reach out to you as quickly as I can, and we'll see if we're a great fit. And other than that, just spread the word about the show. Actually, some really good news about the podcast. At the time that we're having this conversation, it is not live yet. It's going to be live in about 2 days. There is a merch shop that is going to be going live on hopefully Monday, January 6th. There's going to be t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, mugs, tumblers, rocks glasses, all sorts of fun stuff. There's going to be with the Our Dead Dads logo. There's going to be some grief-related quotes and expressions. There's going to be some dark humor expressions, because something that I and a lot of my guests have employed in their stories is dark humor and sarcasm, and there's going to be a lot of that. We're just trying to have some fun with it, and have some fun through some really dark times. When you go, by the time everybody hears this, the show, the store will be live. When you go to ourdeaddads.com, all the way on the right side, it'll actually be to the right of the Contact Us page. It will be a yellow button that says merch. Just click on there and start perusing all of the items and buy everything that you want. Support the podcast, because podcasts are not cheap. They cost money. And I'm just hoping to get everybody the opportunity to have some amazing merch and help spread the word about the podcast. And that's really all I have to say.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing all the ways the audience can get in touch with you. Everybody who's watching this today, go to that website, find out more, get some of that merch, and learn more about the show.
Can I show this? This is a sample of it. This is the Our Dead Dads mug. I got a couple of these for Kim and I for Christmas. So this is just a very small sample of what's going to be on the website.
Awesome. So everybody, he told you exactly where to find him. Go to that website, learn more, and get that awesome merch. If you want to be a guest, he gave you all the ways to do just that. If you want to know more about that nonprofit, please go to that nonprofit website, find out more. And if you feel passionate about it, please go make a donation. $1 or $5 multiplied by all of the people who are watching this episode today can make a huge impact to a nonprofit. Please make sure you're making those donations. And thank you so much for being on today. We're so grateful. And to the audience, we're so grateful to have you here, and we will see you all next week. If you enjoyed this episode of Little Give, head on over to our website at littlegive.com. You'll be able to find all the information about previous episodes and past guests that we've had on. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on Little Give, all the information is also on the website. And if you have a nonprofit that you love and would like to recommend be on the show, all of that information is also on the website. We really appreciate you watching today, and we can't wait to see you again next week.